I know our family is struggling with debt right now. If you get married, we can pay off the debt with the wedding contribution from your spouse's family. You're 18 now, old enough to marry. Marry Freddie. In other words, I was being told to marry that overweight man named Freddie, all for money. For a moment, I thought it was utterly unreasonable, but then I realized I had only two options. Either plunge into a hell of debt by refusing to marry or spend my life with Freddie. As these were the only choices swirling in my head, I remembered something. I was willing to do anything to get out of this house. The story goes back over a decade. My name is Felicity. I grew up being treated terribly by my parents. My father died in a car accident when I was 3. He was a very kind man, but Mom apparently didn't like him very much. I have no memories of being loved by Mom, probably because I resembled my father. Mom remarried just 6 months after my father's death. According to her, she had been involved with my adoptive father even when my father was alive. Mom and my adoptive father, who had betrayed my kind father, treated me horribly. I was treated as if I didn't exist, and my pleas were always ignored. It seemed to get worse after my sister Olivia was born. Mom and my adoptive father adored Olivia. Unlike Olivia, who received all of their love, I was always treated as an outcast. They did give me birthday presents every year, but they were small things like pencils or erasers, while Olivia got anything she wanted. Even at Christmas, Santa Claus never came for me. When I was little, I often cried alone, hugging my knees, thinking that Santa didn't come because I was a bad child. During those painful days, something happened. I was 7 years old. On a day when heavy rain was falling due to a hurricane, Olivia got a fever. My parents, who adored Olivia, were in a panic. My adoptive father told me to buy a sports drink for Olivia. Reluctantly, I went out in the pouring rain wearing a raincoat, but my small body struggled against the strong wind and heavy rain. Moreover, our house was in the countryside, and it took an hour to reach the nearest supermarket on my little legs. When I finally reached the supermarket after great difficulty, I was shocked. I couldn't find the wallet I thought I had brought. I might have dropped it when the wind knocked me down. As I was about to turn back, tears welling in my eyes, I suddenly heard, "Wait a minute," from my older brother. The high school student-like older brother said, "Are you alone? It's dangerous in this weather," in a kind voice. I burst into tears at his gentle demeanor and explained my situation. I desperately told him about my sister's fever and how my parents had sent me shopping, and the older brother seemed to understand my situation. "You don't need to look for your wallet. I'll help you with the shopping," he said, and he helped me with all my shopping. I had lost my wallet and couldn't pay a single dollar, but my older brother told me not to worry and even gave me the change. He also took me close to home in a taxi, and I felt the kindness of others for the first time in a long time. "Thank you, big brother," I said with all my heart as I got out of the taxi, and my older brother's gentle smile was very impressive. I, who had spent such a childhood, turned 18. When I was a child, I only felt constrained by being treated differently from my sister, but now, as an 11th grader, my problem is money. Mom and adoptive father were against me going to high school in the first place. Apparently, they thought it was a waste to spend money on me. But I insisted on going to high school, and the condition they gave me was that if I wanted to go to high school and stay at home, I had to put $1,000 into the family every month. The money I earned desperately from part-time jobs was consumed by living expenses. When I became an 11th grader, I had to study for college in addition to my part-time job, and I was very busy. Mom and adoptive father probably won't pay for my college. I spent all my time working and studying to get a scholarship. One day, Olivia, who had become an 8th grader, came home triumphantly and said to our parents, "Listen, listen! I got scouted by the entertainment industry." What Olivia put on the dining table was a business card from an entertainment production company I had never heard of. Mom and adoptive father said, "Olivia is cute, after all," and were delighted. "Olivia has a sparkle, so I thought something like this might happen." "Keep it up, Olivia. Having a daughter as a celebrity is great. Way to go, Olivia. You're nothing like your big sister." "Well, of course. I'm much, much cuter than my big sister." Olivia, raised by parents who had always looked down on me and praised Olivia, compared herself to me at every opportunity. This time, she arrogantly asked, "You think so too, don't you, big sister?" I replied, "Yes." Because arguing would undoubtedly lead to trouble. Olivia was supposed to have joined an entertainment agency, but months went by without any contact. The parents, who thought it was strange that they were being charged for lessons and membership fees, found out that the entertainment agency was a fraudulent group and had already disappeared. All that was left for the parents was a debt of $20,000. The parents looked desperate, but I just calmly paid $1,000 to the family and focused on my studies. I won't spare any effort if I can get out of this house. With that in mind, I was working hard at my part-time job and studying. A few weeks later, when I got home, I heard an unfamiliar voice from the living room. Wondering what it was, I was about to go up to my room on the 2nd floor when I heard adoptive father calling me from the living room. Wondering what it was about, I peeked into the living room and found 2 unfamiliar men besides adoptive father. One was a man of the same age as adoptive father, and the other was a very fat man. As I was surprised by the size of the man sweating in the air-conditioned room, adoptive father introduced the 2. "This is Mr. Newell. Say hello." "Ah, nice to meet you." As I hurriedly greeted them, the 2 men smiled and looked at me. Mr. Newell is a well-known large-scale landowner in this area, known to everyone. Why would such people come to our house? As I was puzzled, adoptive father said something outrageous. "Mr. Newell's son, Freddie, is your fiancé. Be polite." "What?" Startled, I raised my voice, and adoptive father, looking flustered, took me out into the hallway. "What's going on?" I asked adoptive father in a whisper, and he answered in a whisper as well. "You know we're in trouble with debt. If you marry, we can pay off the debt with a wedding contribution from their family. You're 18 now and can marry. Marry Freddie." In other words, I had to marry that fat man, Freddie, for money. I thought it was utterly unreasonable for a moment, but I realized I had only 2 choices. Either reject the marriage and plunge into debt hell, or marry and live with Freddie. As those were the only 2 options swirling in my head, I remembered. I was willing to do anything to get out of this house. "Are you done talking? What do you think, Felicity? Will you marry our Freddie?" Mr. Newell, who had been waiting in the living room, asked me anxiously. I answered with a smile. "Yes, gladly." And so, I was to marry Freddie. That very day, I was told to live at Freddie's house right away and was kicked out of the house. With only my study materials, Freddie asked, "Don't you have any clothes or anything?" But I had never bought cute clothes. "That's all I have," I said. Freddie lowered his eyebrows and said, "I see." Mr. Newell, no, my father-in-law, was a well-known landowner whose name I had heard, but he was a very friendly person. His car drove through a large gate and into a vast estate. And it stopped in front of a solitary house. "This is a separate house I built for Freddie when he got married, but Freddie couldn't find a spouse. I'm glad a wonderful woman like Felicity is marrying him. I live in the main house, so Felicity, you should live here with Freddie." With just a brief explanation, my father-in-law said, "Well, I'll leave it to the young couple," and left Freddie and me behind. Suddenly alone, I was a bit wary of Freddie, but he calmly showed me around the separate house. And he brought me to a spacious room furnished with furniture, saying, "This is your room, Felicity. The inside lock works, and if you're worried, don't hesitate to ask for a key change. I won't lay a finger on you, Felicity. I've told your parents that we'll cover your high school expenses. You should reduce your part-time job if you can. That way, you can study more. If you want to go to college, I'll let you go." I blinked at the unexpectedly good treatment. Freddie even said he had no intention of getting a marriage license, and that we would have a common law marriage, so I could go to another man if I found one I liked. Far exceeding my expectations, I inadvertently asked, "What is this marriage for? I feel like I'm the only one benefiting." I wondered if it was rude after I said it, but it would be troublesome if I were asked for something outrageous later. Thinking I should check just in case, I waited for Freddie's words, and he began with, "I might be meddling, but..." and then answered, "I thought you might be in trouble, Felicity. Do you remember when you went shopping on the day of the hurricane when you were little? We met then, but do you remember?" I was taken aback. There's no way I wouldn't remember. I still remember the face of the kind older brother from that time. I realized that if older brother gained weight, he might look like this. "Are you the older brother from that time? I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you." It can't be helped since I've gained a lot of weight. Stress from becoming a working adult made me eat too much. "But you haven't changed, Felicity. When my dad showed me your picture and asked if I wanted to marry you, I knew right away it was you. Are you still being discriminated against and suffering like your sister?" Just like on the day of the hurricane, Freddie spoke to me kindly, and I nodded. Then Freddie smiled to reassure me. "It's okay now. You don't have to worry about money or being treated badly anymore. You can live freely in this house, okay?" Touched by Freddie's kindness, tears welled up in my eyes. In front of Freddie, who hurriedly handed me a beautiful handkerchief, I cried, and from that day on, Freddie and I started living together. I spent my first ever free time studying. I was so happy to be able to study for college like this. Freddie said he didn't need living expenses, but I decided to contribute only $300 because living for free felt constraining. Since I only had to earn $300 and my allowance, I was able to significantly reduce my part-time job hours. Freddie took the initiative in doing household chores, and when I was doing them, he would kindly say, "You can go study," and take over for me. In the happiest days of my life, Freddie and I gradually grew closer. We spent our days like an ordinary married couple, laughing together while watching variety shows, and going out on holidays. A few months later, I was leading a calm life when I received a phone call from my adoptive father. What could he want now, after never worrying about me and leaving me alone all this time? I picked up the phone with a bad feeling. "Hello? Felicity, is that you? Mom's in serious trouble." I was taken aback by adoptive father's loud voice as soon as I answered the phone. According to adoptive father, Mom had fallen sick and needed immediate surgery, so he was calling to ask me to transfer $10,000 to a specified account. Mom had neglected me since childhood, but she was still my mom. Facing a life-threatening situation, I couldn't just ignore her. "What happened all of a sudden? Which hospital and what kind of illness?" When I asked out of concern, adoptive father hesitated, saying, Well, it's the hospital, but..." I began to feel something was off as adoptive father suddenly became flustered. He couldn't even name the disease, which was clearly suspicious. "You're lying, aren't you?" "Enough, don't call me for such nonsense." "Wait. Okay, I admit it, I lied. The truth is, I had an accident recently, and I'm being billed $10,000. According to adoptive father, he had crashed his car the other day, and the person he hit was a scary guy. He was now being billed $10,000 for repairs and medical expenses, and he claimed he couldn't pay. My irritation with him grew. "You're probably lying again." "It's true this time. Please, Felicity. Ask Freddie to transfer the $10,000. You're all we have left." I snapped at adoptive father's desperate plea. "Don't mess with me. I can't believe you called after so long just to ask for money. Neither you nor Mom ever cared about me, not even once. And now you want me to help you? That's too convenient. No matter what you say, I have no intention of transferring the money. Goodbye." Ignoring adoptive father's plea to wait, I hung up the phone and blocked the numbers of adoptive father, Mom, and Olivia. A few weeks later, as I happened to pass by my family's house, I noticed it was vacant. A gossip-loving neighbor lady approached me, and from her, I learned that the story about hitting a scary guy's car was true. According to the neighbor lady, my parents and Olivia had secretly packed their bags and left the house at night. They must have fled and are likely living a hidden life now. Living in fear must be incredibly stifling. Thinking about it, I felt a sense of relief deep in my heart. Meanwhile, I was living happy days. I had completely fallen in love with Freddie. Though Freddie, who was 10 years older than me, was often hesitant about dating me, my persistent confessions led to a decision to start dating once I graduated from high school. Freddie even took time off work to attend my high school graduation ceremony. As he accompanied me in my eating and exercise habits, Freddie slimmed down to his original figure and transformed into a handsome man. My friends were envious when I proudly introduced him as my boyfriend. After my high school graduation, Freddie and I submitted our marriage registration to officially get married. When I said I wanted to marry, Freddie nodded in agreement, so we decided to submit the marriage registration. It would take a little time for the marriage certificate to be issued, but now we were officially a married couple, not just in a common law marriage. On the way home from the city hall, we held hands for the first time. I laughed at Freddie's adorable shyness, and he said, "Now that you're my wife, Felicity, you can't be swayed by any handsome boys you meet in college." I thought I was the only one in love, but it seemed Freddie loved me very much too. I found it so ticklish that I burst into laughter. There's no way that could happen. Out of all the people I've met, Freddie is the most handsome. After quitting his job post-marriage, Brian, who now only works a part-time job 3 days a week, keeps dumping household chores on me, despite my full-time job. To add insult to injury, he's stingy with living expenses and started ignoring me when I confronted him about using my credit card without permission. Hey, I'm at my limit. I complained after dinner one day, but Brian didn't even look at me and went upstairs to his study. Determined to talk it out, I was halfway up the stairs when I heard Brian's voice. He seemed to be on the phone with his mother, Zoe. "Mom? Lily is still acting all high and mighty. I'm fed up, so why not introduce me to some cute girl? It's fine, she's totally into me. She won't complain even if she finds out." I felt like my breath had stopped. How much does this man look down on me? Asking his own mom to set him up with someone else, unforgivable. I bit my lip and whispered to myself, "Just you wait. I'll make you regret ever taking my feelings for granted." I'm Lily, a 34-year-old housewife. I work as a regular employee at a major company. 7 years ago, I met Brian when he joined the company right after graduating from college, and we became close as we worked on the same team. His slightly needy side was cute to me, and I was happy he relied on me, being older. After we started dating, I accepted Brian's proposal and we got married. Brian lost his dad in his teens, but I never got the impression he was a mama's boy, and we only saw Zoe at Christmas. Zoe lived a bit far away and never just dropped by, so Brian and I were having a peaceful married life. However, Brian's actions suddenly cast a shadow over everything. "We can live on your salary alone, right?" One day, Brian suddenly broached the subject after coming home from work. "Excuse me? I quit my job today." I was shocked by Brian's nonchalant declaration. Without showing any remorse, Brian continued with a smile. "From tomorrow, it's all on you to work hard, Lily. Oh, and I'm counting on you for the housework too. I'll help out a bit." I was speechless. "Wait a minute. You're telling me this after the fact?" "Yeah. It's my decision to make." Brian had been working in a different department for a while. He didn't seem to be struggling with his job, but maybe he was stressed? Still, he could have at least consulted me before quitting. Trying not to show my disappointment, I asked, "So, you're becoming a house husband?" "I don't want to do housework all day." "Then how about looking for a part-time job?" "I want you to contribute to our finances." "All right, I'll give you money for groceries and utilities. You take care of the rest of the payments. And I'd like an allowance of $1,000. $1,000? I exclaimed in surprise, to which Brian nonchalantly replied, "It's cheaper than hiring a housekeeper." His words bothered me. He must be planning to work within my tax allowance. I've never heard of someone working part-time, earning less than $10,000 a year, and getting a $1,000 monthly allowance. But I didn't want to argue, so I reluctantly agreed. Brian, with his charming smile, was very popular. Even when we got married. Why would he marry someone older? There are plenty of prettier women out there. Female colleagues were jealous. Brian must have been facing troubles I didn't know about. If job stress could make him sick, then changing jobs was the better option. I was willing to work more for that. Since he lived at home until we got married, it was understandable he wasn't good at housework. I hoped he would get better with time. But my hopes were quickly dashed. At first, he would rinse the dishes and put them in the dishwasher, even vacuum the house, but after 6 months, Brian completely stopped doing any housework. For instance, one day, after an early morning start in overtime, I came home tired to find breakfast dishes still in the sink, and a pot that only needed reheating was left in the fridge. "Sorry, I've been busy too. You know, looking for a better part-time job." Brian made an excuse while lounging on the sofa. The laundry was also wrinkled, left in the washing machine. Brian, who works a 3-hour part-time job 3 times a week, was off today. "I'm busy right now, Lily, can you make it?" I reluctantly asked Brian as I put the pot on the stove. "Just like I said before, work is really hectic for me right now. So, I'd really appreciate it if you could take on a bit more of the household chores. Leaving for work at 6 a.m. and getting back at 8 p.m. doesn't leave much time for anything else." Then Brian frowned unpleasantly. "I do take out the trash and clean my own room. And I bring in the laundry when it starts to rain." "Yeah, and that helps. But preparing meals alone takes up all my time. I even make your lunch." "Don't get all high and mighty over that." I stared at Brian with wide eyes. Brian twisted his face and spat out irritably. "Just because you earn a little, you're acting all superior. That's disgusting. You only got to be an assistant manager and earn more than me because of everyone else's support. Don't you understand that?" Leaving me speechless, Brian went upstairs with his mobile phone in hand and slammed the door of his study. Since then, Brian's selfish behavior became even more apparent. If I used the dryer because I couldn't rely on Brian, he would complain later. "I was planning to hang the laundry properly." "You don't trust me, do you, Lily?" On another sunny day, trusting Brian and not using the dryer, I came home to find the laundry still in the washing machine. During such a weekend, while Brian was out, Zoe suddenly showed up. It takes an hour and a half by car from the in-laws' house, so we only visit together at Christmas. I remember being scolded by Zoe when Brian left the room during our pre-marriage meeting. Marrying a woman 4 years older? Brian could have anyone he wanted, why choose you? Knowing that Zoe didn't like me, I wished she would leave soon but still offered her slippers. Then, standing at the entrance, Zoe snapped at me. What do you think you're doing, making Brian do all the work? Excuse me? Making Brian do the housework, you're a terrible wife. I knew we shouldn't have let him marry you. I retorted, albeit confused. With all due respect, I work full-time too, so we're sharing the chores. Though recently, Brian hardly does anything. Zoe's eyes widened, and she yelled at me. Of course you do, you're the woman. Listen, Brian is delicate and fragile. If he collapses because of you, I'll sue you. Yelling one-sidedly, Zoe left. When Brian came back from shopping and I told him about Zoe's visit. Aha. He replied indifferently. I wish you wouldn't discuss our private matters with Mom. I wanted to argue, but it felt like complaining, so I ended up not saying anything to Brian. I'm tired today. I'm busy too. Brian started using excuses like these to dump all the household chores on me, and then caused an even bigger problem. When I tried to use my credit card at the grocery store on the way home from work, the payment was inexplicably declined. Shocked, I checked the app and found the card maxed out with charges I didn't recognize. Thinking it was a mistake, I contacted the credit card company and found out Brian had racked up nearly $10,000 in game charges and brand clothing purchases. He remembered the PIN I gave him when we bought an appliance and used it without permission. I couldn't overlook this and confronted Brian as soon as I got home. Why are you using my credit card without asking? You have your own, don't you? $1,000 a month isn't nearly enough. Then maybe you should work more? It's a waste to spend all your time playing games at home. Brian glared at me with a terrifying look. I braced for a yelling, but he just clicked his tongue and left the living room. His footsteps were heavy as he went upstairs, slammed the door to his study, and didn't come out for the rest of the evening. And from the next morning, he started ignoring me. Good morning. I'm off. No matter what I said, Brian would not even glance at me, sitting on the sofa and fiddling with his mobile phone. When I rushed to make and serve dinner, he would eat while laughing at videos on his phone, leaving his dirty dishes on the table before going to take a shower. And so, Brian would not make eye contact with me, ignoring any attempt at conversation. Of course, he never initiated any conversation with me either, acting as if I had suddenly become invisible. I had a plan I wanted to discuss, but under these circumstances, I couldn't bring it up. Then came the payday for Brian's part-time job. As usual, I put the $1,000 allowance in an envelope and handed it to him. Brian snatched it away and started to leave. Hey, can you give me the $700 for groceries and utilities? I called out to his back, but he went upstairs as if he hadn't heard me at all. I felt like holding my head in despair. With the rent, utilities, taxes for both of us, insurance, and communication costs all on me, life gets pretty tough without that $700. But since Brian seemed unwilling to give it, I reluctantly paid it out of my own savings and allowance. As the days of being ignored by Brian continued, I found myself overwhelmed with a heavy mood all day long. By evening, I'd be engulfed in gloom, seriously not wanting to go home. I'd kill time in restaurants or grocery stores after work, even staying in business hotels. But in the end, running away from the problem solved nothing. If Brian's mood improved, we might not be lovey-dovey, but at least we could have normal conversations. Maybe when I get home today, he'll respond as if nothing happened. Though it didn't happen tonight, maybe when we wake up, he'll say, "Good morning," with a smile. Holding on to that hope, I was ignored for 3 months, until my body reached its limit. I could hardly eat, losing 8 pounds. Brian just laughed and scrolled through his phone, leaving his finished plate on the table and moving to the sofa, seemingly oblivious to me eating oatmeal with a pale face. I put down my spoon, stood up, and went to Brian with a voice so faint it might disappear. "Hey, I'm at my limit." Brian seemed annoyed by me, stood up from the sofa, and went upstairs to his study. I slowly rinsed the dishes, loaded the dishwasher, wiped my hands, turned it on, and left the kitchen. This isn't right. I need to talk to Brian. Tomorrow's my day off, so it's a good chance to talk without worrying about time. Halfway up the stairs, I heard Brian's elated voice. He seemed to be on the phone with Zoe. Mom, Lily is still acting all high and mighty. I'm so fed up. Can you introduce me to someone cute? It's okay, she's totally into me. She won't complain even if she finds out. My breath almost stopped. How much does this man look down on me? Asking his own mom to set him up with someone else, unforgivable. I bit my lip and muttered in my heart. Just you wait. I'll make you regret trampling on my feelings. My feelings for Brian cooled instantly, and I put into action a plan I had been considering for a while. I waited until Brian was asleep, took only my ID, and left the house. I stayed in a hotel that night, and in the morning, I contacted a real estate agent saying, I want to move in earlier. They agreed readily. After sorting out the gas, electricity, and water, I returned home while Brian was at his part-time job, and had the movers take my things to the new place. The apartment we lived in was a new designer apartment costing $1,500 in rent alone. I would have been happy with a cheaper place, but Brian insisted. So, when Brian quit his full-time job, I started looking for a cheaper, used apartment. I had planned to discuss it with Brian, but since he started ignoring me, I went to viewings alone and prepared to move as soon as his mood improved. But after hearing yesterday's conversation, I had no intention of telling Brian or Zoe where I moved. I decided to divorce and live on my own. Brian initially ignored the fact that I had left the house and didn't contact me at all. But after a month, he started calling my mobile phone incessantly, day and night. My message inbox was filled with Brian's desperate messages. Lily, where are you? It's terrible to just leave like that. I got a notice that the rent couldn't be withdrawn. It's supposed to come out of our account, right? Did you forget to deposit? Deposit the money immediately. I'm getting reminders for the utilities, mobile phone bills, and even from the car insurance company. Put some money in, quickly. By the way, where's my $1,000 allowance? It's your choice to leave, but it's a problem if you don't pay for things. It's common sense for the one with money to pay, right? How am I supposed to live on $800 a month? Don't ignore me. Brian was the one who ignored me first. I was just doing the same thing he did, but why is he so angry? And yet, no apology, just selfish demands. While I was dumbfounded reading the messages, Zoe called. I didn't want to answer, but ignoring her would only cause more trouble, so I reluctantly pressed the talk button. Hello? Seriously, Lily. Running away from home and leaving Brian behind, what are you thinking? Acting on your own despite being his wife. Come back right now. I sighed and calmly retorted. I'm not going back to that house. Huh? You plan to abandon your duties as a wife? Who's going to take care of Brian? Brian is 30, not a toddler. He can take care of himself. If you're so concerned, maybe you should move in and take care of him? My word. The one who really acted selfishly was him. I explained with restrained anger and in a calm voice. He quit his job to work part-time 3 days a week. His salary dropped, and even though I only asked for help with groceries and utilities, I couldn't even get that. Then he started using my credit card without permission, and when I confronted him, he began ignoring me. That's why I left. Zoe fell silent all of a sudden. After a while, she muttered, confused. Wait, he quit his job? The major company he was so proud to get into to please his mom? Yes. He quit suddenly one day without any discussion, saying we could live on my salary alone. Sure, I earn a decent wage because I'm his supervisor. But it was shocking when he quit out of the blue. Well, I suppose. Zoe sounded baffled. So, for the past year, Brian has been living off my salary. And he wouldn't even do the household chores. If you don't believe me, I can forward you the messages from Brian. It seemed Zoe had no idea Brian had quit his job. When I sent Zoe the message Brian had recently sent me, she explained in a soft voice. Brian has been consulting with me frequently. What about? Well, he said he's working hard, even doing overtime and working on holidays, but you hardly work because you're tired and neglects the housework. He said that you're living off his salary, yet you act all high and mighty, and that he's fed up and wants to have fun with a cute girl to relieve stress. That's what he told me. That's the complete opposite of the truth. I was utterly dismayed by Brian's lies, even to Zoe. How much more can he disrespect his life? He probably thinks Zoe will scold him and then he'll just come back home. First off, I've never heard of a mom looking for affair partners for her son. What are you thinking, Zoe? I pressed Zoe with a stern tone, and she started making excuses. Well, he says married life is tough, and he's venting. If he gets sick from stress, it'd be terrible. If matching him with a young girl makes him happy, it's a small price to pay. I couldn't get any living expenses, and after being ignored for 3 months, I was the one who nearly got sick. Besides, that's disrespectful to any woman you introduce him to. Well, handsome Brian is popular, so even though he's married, there are surely women who'd want to date him. Well, if he were still working at that company, that is. That's not the problem, I thought bitterly. It's no wonder talking to Zoe was getting nowhere. Like mother, like son. It seems divorce is the only option. Divorce? It doesn't have to come to that. He's probably regretting it by now. Zoe suddenly started panicking. She cares most about appearances. She must want to avoid her successful, good-looking son getting divorced at all costs. I made it clear. Regretting? How? I'm not his ATM. It's best if he divorces me, then he can play around and spend money however he likes. That's... Lily, can't you reconsider? He needs you. Zoe pleaded, but I coldly informed her. Brian seems likely to drag out the divorce, so I'll be hiring a lawyer. Please direct any further communication through them. I'll be seeking compensation for the ignored period and the unpaid living expenses, as well as the unauthorized credit card charges. Can Brian even afford to pay that? Zoe muttered as if it were someone else's problem. If the son can't pay, then the parents will have to. What? That's why I'm asking you to let Brian know I want a divorce. I'm counting on you. Lily, please, reconsider. I hung up without listening to the rest of Zoe's plea. The next day, I called a lawyer to discuss the divorce, secured an appointment for consultation, and felt a bit relieved. While enjoying a week of paid leave in my new place and unpacking, my mobile phone signaled a message. I wanted to block Brian and Zoe's contacts, but until the divorce was finalized, there might be a need to communicate. So, I left their contacts unblocked, without setting them to reject calls. I realized it was a mistakenly sent message. It appeared Zoe, not adept with mobile phones, had accidentally posted in the family group chat thinking it was a message to Brian personally. I decided to read it as well since it was shared. Brian, this isn't what we talked about. I was humiliated. What's wrong? You quit your job to work part-time 3 days a week? There was a pause. Did you hear that from Lily? Yes. Living off Lily's salary? It's shameful for a man to earn less than a woman. Mom, don't say such outdated things. That's why I kept it a secret. Brian quickly retorts. Well, nowadays there's something called a house husband, so if you were working properly, that would be fine. But working only 3 days without doing any housework and still acting all high and mighty? Anyone would want a divorce, not just Lily. Surprisingly, Zoe was on my side, likely disappointed in Brian. Stop pestering me. I won't divorce. She's in love with me and will come back regretting it soon. I couldn't help but scoff. I was stunned. Still saying such things. Where does his confidence that his wife wouldn't despise him no matter how badly he treated her come from? What happened to introducing me to a young and cute girl? That's off the table. Why? I was looking forward to it. Do you even understand your situation? No girl wants to get close to a 30-year-old man living off his wife's salary and working part-time. I burst out laughing, imagining Zoe's exasperated face. Someone will be out there. You know I've always been popular, Mom. If you were still employed at a prestigious company and a university graduate, there might be girls willing to date you, hoping for more, even if it's an affair. But not the current you. Really? Brian's response was ever so nonchalant against Zoe's anger. You can still make it. Go back to working at a big company like before. No, it's bothersome. Living off Lily's salary and lazing around is much easier. Brian's carefree admission was appalling. That's not how it works. Lily is planning to divorce you and claim compensation, including the credit card charges. I don't have that kind of money. If a bill comes, you'll pay, right? You have Dad's inheritance. You'd be happy to use it for your beloved son, right? Then Zoe's replies stopped. Mom? Hey, we're not done talking. Respond, please. After a pause, the message resumed. Why aren't you picking up the phone? Don't ignore me. Zoe had blocked Brian. While pondering this, Brian called me. Ignoring it led to a voicemail message. He rambled on in several messages. Mom has disowned me. Lily, you wouldn't abandon me, would you? It's okay you left. Come back home. You're not serious about divorce, are you? You're just sulking, right? Fine, I'll agree to a divorce. I guess I was partly at fault. But I can't pay the compensation or the credit card charges. I just can't afford it. Anyway, keep paying the rent and taxes as usual. Your husband is in trouble. You earn enough to help out, right? And my allowance too. My astonishment surpassed anger. He probably still doesn't realize he's at fault. A few days later, Brian received a certified mail regarding the compensation and credit card repayment, and, finally understanding the situation and panicking, he sought legal advice. I love Lily. She's just upset thinking I dislike her. If she comes back now, I'll forgive her. Such nonsensical claims were made, but under legal advice, realizing I was serious, he turned pale. Despite his reluctance, the lawyer managed to settle the divorce after 6 months. Feeling refreshed, I blocked Brian and Zoe's contacts. Abandoned by Zoe, Brian was at a loss. Burdened with the $10,000 compensation, 3 months of unpaid living expenses, $10,000 for unauthorized credit card use, plus his own debts, of course he was. Brian, who had splurged on branded clothes using the allowance and my credit card, reluctantly sold his purchases for cash. Still short, he pleaded with the lawyer for a monthly payment arrangement. Procedures to seize his account if there was no payment were put in place. Unable to PAF for the rent without my support, Brian moved to an older apartment. He had no choice but to increase his part-time hours to make ends meet. An ex-colleague who spotted Brian mentioned he was so emaciated, they hardly recognized him. I hope this serves as a wake-up call for him to discard his spoiled attitude and embrace independence. Freed from Brian, my earnings no longer drained by him, and liberated from the misery of being ignored, I've recovered fully. As a result of working with more motivation than ever before, I was promoted from assistant manager to manager, and with an increased salary, I'm living busy yet fulfilling days. I aim to balance work and personal life for a meaningful life.